22 million black victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. Any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. Either way you go, that's who gets it. You're in a position to determine who go to the White House and who stay in the doghouse. You're the one who has that power. You and I have never seen democracy. All we've seen is hypocrisy. When we open our eyes today and look around America, we see America not through the eyes of someone who has enjoyed the fruits of Americanism. We see America through the eyes of someone who has been the victim of Americanism. We don't see any American dream. We've experienced only the American nightmare. We haven't benefited from America's democracy. We've only suffered from America's hypocrisy. And the generation that's coming up now can see it and are not afraid to say it. 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 And are not afraid to say it.
And are not afraid to say it. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You are tuned into Black Westchester Presents, the People Before Politics radio show, episode 329. Today we're going to have a conversation on the recent comments made by Yonkers Mayor Mike Spano toward Congressman Jamaal Bowman. And I have an all-star panel coming in throughout the show. First and foremost, I want to thank everybody for the abundance of love y'all showed me for my birthday. My birthday was yesterday. I turned 56. I was hundreds and hundreds of you showered me with great birthday blessings, and shout out Steve Sternberg, who actually wrote me a birthday poem and posted it. It was beautiful. But through Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, text message, and several phone calls, I just want to thank everybody for the love that you showed me for my birthday. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And without further ado, let me bring in my partner, Dr. Bob. How are you, my brother?
I'm good, AJ. How are you this evening? Obviously, I'm the leadoff hitter on the MVP team. Yes. Don't try to be in the Hall of Fame yet, y'all. No votes yet. No votes. Good, man. Belated happy birthday to you, bro.
Yo, thank you. It was great hanging out with you and your son. Shout out to Blake.
Absolutely.
That was a beautiful thing. So today's show, we're gonna get right into it. Most of you, and I posted the link, most of you by now have heard the recent comments that were made by Yonkers Mayor Mike Spano, where he said something along the lines of, Congressman Jamaal Bowman should be arrested for the no vote in the infrastructure on the infrastructure bill. We had Congressman Bowman on after the vote explaining why he voted no. Both bills were supposed to go together, and they decided separated. He said if they get what they want, they will never pass the second part of it. And if history has shown, I think he was on the right side of history, because the Democrats have never got the second part of that bill passed, the Build Back Better bill. It was supposed to all go together. So that was the reason. I'll put the link up later. Y'all can watch that interview where he talks about that. And I have with me today to kick off the show members of the Anti-Racism Alliance in their coalition. Sandy Barnebei, a longtime friend of the show. How are you?
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Listen, AJ, happy birthday.
Thank you.
You deserve all that love that's come your way. And
Thank you. And just before I bring in your other two guests that you invited to, I just wanted to, so you were one of the first people that actually sent me the Yonkers Times article. And after reading it, sometimes we jump to judgment on certain things. The word racism in today's society is thrown around too much. Everything is not racism. Some things may be implicit bias. Some things are other things. Some things are just discrimination, but they're not racism. And as a member and the head of the Anti-Racism Alliance, I remember the first thing I asked you was, in reading this, does this fall under the lens of racism? And I wanted to give you a chance to answer that. And if yes, why?
Well, first of all, the ease with which this mayor could call for the arrest of a Black man was just so outrageous and appalling. And as long as I've known, I've never heard of a local elected official ever asking for the arrest of a white politician for a vote. Never. And so I wanted to talk a little bit more about it. I don't know if we should bring the others in, but I just have some thoughts. But the first thing I want to say is that when I feel sick inside of me, when I feel that sense of shame inside of me, because some white person has done something sick and shameful, I know it's racism. I know that this was not something that would have been done or said about me. So I trust myself and my gut. And I felt sick and ashamed that this man could speak so disrespectfully to a congressman.
Go ahead and introduce your two guests, and I'm going to bring them on the screen.
Okay. First, I want to bring in Karen Norman. Karen Norman is a member of the Anti-Racist Alliance. She has been with us for the 20 years of our existence, an organizer in social services. She can speak for herself. She lives in Mount Vernon. She's on the board of directors of the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, and is here to represent Mount Vernon. And our other guest is David Billings. He's a white anti-racist historian with the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, and has been organizing with us and mentored us and continues to mentor us to do the structure, to stay focused on structural racism and to not get caught up in reactive. Yes, we have to react, but that we have to continue the deep work of undoing structural racism. And those are the two that have agreed to join us tonight on short notice.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show, Karen and David. How are you?
Thank you. Well, thank you. Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. So Karen, what are your thoughts on, I know you're familiar with the story by now. And I did an article. There's been a lot of pushback from several organizations, the Westchester Black Women's Political Caucus, the Black Dems of Westchester, the NAACP from New Rochelle and Yonkers. Several other organizations have released statements. Even a Black pastor at Mount Vernon, who's my pastor, Pastor Poe from Greater Centennial, has actually released a statement that these comments were disgusting and outlandish. What were your thoughts when you first heard the story and read it?
Well, what I always think about are the dog whistles that we hear. I think that sometimes the way we define racism limits us in our thinking, that if it's not a completely outrageous statement, then it isn't racism. But racism takes many forms. I think sometimes these kinds of innocuous slights are even worse. This is a microaggression. Both men of power, however, certainly calling for the immediate jailing or incarceration of a Black man is going to stir a lot of people and create a lot of anger. And does it really rise to that level that needed to be said? And I think it's important. I'm glad we're having the conversation, because I think a lot of times we ignore these types of things when they're happening, and without giving Mayor Spano, he needs an opportunity to retract that statement, to really think about it. And I think that this is a moment of education for him and many other white leaders who maybe are careless with their words and don't understand the impact of racism and what it has done to language, sentiment, and unconscious bias.
And I'm glad you said unconscious bias. I wanted to bring that up because is now I listened to it. I got the audio, and it appears that the host was making a joke. Maybe he's trying to get arrested again, and then Spano then replied, "Yeah, he should have been arrested for his vote, even if it was a joke."
Right.
Which was ill-advised joke. Now, does it fall under racism or implicit bias, like where he didn't know that would be offensive? I just want your thoughts on that.
I think that implicit bias comes out of racial tropes that we're not consciously aware of, that have happened for so long, have been indoctrinated and become a way in which we operate, in a way in which we see things, to the point where we're not even associating and making the connotation. So I do think it comes from a thread of being able to very easily think about jailing Black people. It probably comes from a very negative stance on people of color that he may not consciously be aware would have so much weight, because these are things that people just say all the time.
Mr. Billings, David, how are you, sir? Welcome to the show. What were your thoughts when you read and heard the mayor's comments? And you have to unmute yourself. You're on mute.
Yeah, I agree with everything Karen just said and Sandy before. You know, that white people are very, in my experience, being white and also working a lot with white people, we're very casual. We will say things and then claim, well, I didn't mean that, or that, you know, I was misinterpreted. You know, we're always trying to make excuses for insensitivity. Now, that's not everyone, but it happens enough so that in, you know, and with Congressman Bowman, whom we should all be celebrating, you know, for his representation. I live in the northern part of the Bronx, and he is also, I'm in his district. And there's always been, from the day he got elected, you know, criticism of where he stands on this and that. Is he inclusive enough? Is he discriminating against? So when I heard that he was being criticized for his stance on the infrastructure bill, I suspected it was being taken out of context. And in fact, it was. You know, he just felt like that he had a commitment. The Black Caucus had a commitment, you know, that both parts of the bill would be passed simultaneously. So I think that these kind of, we're not often aware of the power of our words, and how, because of history, how certain people will take certain statements, and how others will say, well, I was just, you know, I was just telling a joke. I didn't really mean it. But history tells us that our words can be hurtful, regardless of what we think our intent was.
I'm glad you said that. The words. You know, a lot of times we hear things. Oh, they're just words. Oh, that was just a joke. Oh, you know, and I get in trouble for this comparison sometimes. I watched the rollout for the Holocaust. A lot of people expressed how devastating it was. A lot of people are emotional. Some people are angry. But what I didn't hear is people be told why are they so angry, or you know, they didn't have to defend their emotions and stuff. But when African Americans, we talk about slavery and stuff like that, it's like, oh, just get over it. When will we get over it? But with the Holocaust, it was more like never forget and never again. And you know, moving forward, if a person's words, even if they were not intended to be harmful, but to a group of people, but that group of people feels offended, I think that's where we are here. You know what I'm saying? I'm not really ready to pull the trigger that just Mike Spano was an all-out racist. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and that he doesn't like Black people. But I believe that his comments were offensive, And even if he didn't mean that, I want to speak to that a little bit.
I want to add something to that, AJ. You know, when he said that, look, he's the mayor of a city that has twice been under DOJ supervision. The police department twice have been under investigation for racial discrimination, right? So when he says something like that, if he is the mayor of a city that's almost 50% people of color, and he doesn't understand that that is a police nerve that he's just triggered, then he's incompetent. This is something that when you're under DOJ investigation for racial discrimination, this is something that you have on your radar, that you understand. And you're saying, his words were that Bowman isn't in line with those who live here. Well, 52% of Yonkers is white, but 48% are people of color. So who is he talking about who lives here? Is he talking about people who look like me? Because if he was talking about people of color who live in Yonkers, right, then he may not say that Mr. Bowman doesn't have those people's best interest in mind. So okay, implicit bias. But after DOJ is there for 2 investigations for racial discrimination, and then you make a racialized statement like that, I don't know. Is that implicit bias, or is that just being white and that he can make flippant remarks, even that he knows would have these undertones? So either way, we have to deal with this, right? Either way, we have to deal with this. But I don't want to give him a pass that it was just implicit bias.
I want to just say, though, that as a Black woman and being an oppressed person, I don't like to compare oppressions. I think we get in trouble when we do that. I think that people who've experienced oppression have a right to voice. And quite often, when you deal in white culture, our voices are nullified and where people attempt to silence us. So I never want to make the equivalence between the Holocaust or any other form of oppression, because all are horrible, all have harmed people. I just wanted to say that. But I also think that there's a level of privilege attached to being able to say whatever it is that you're thinking at any given time. I don't think that level of privilege is afforded to people of color. Even leaders of color are not afforded this idea that they could say anything and make a flub and have it be a learning experience. That is something that is really afforded to those who are very privileged. This is an opportunity, as Sandy said, for the mayor to grow from this conversation and open himself up to the idea that his words have reverberating effect upon people who have been oppressed, upon people who are very anxious by the idea of being heavily policed or jailed. And it was a flippant comment. And I think that that's important to say. And I do think it's important to say that it stems from a stream of racism that then becomes unconscious bias, because everyone in society has breathed in that air. And we're all, I think, susceptible to some of those ideas and some of those tentacles that reach every facet of society.
Absolutely. I thank you for that, and don't make it be clear. I am not giving him a pass. There is no pass to be given on this situation.
I don't think you're giving him a pass.
This is definitely unacceptable.
Yeah.
But I wanted to have an honest conversation. I wanted to find certain things, because there are certain things that are being said that are racist, that are sometimes not racism. They may be discrimination and maybe other things. And I wanted to put the clarifications on those things, and I wanted to get to that point. Welcome to my partner, Damon K. Jones, just joined the show. Any comments, Damon?
Good evening, everybody. I only have like an hour, so
Right.
I just wanted to come on. I've known Mike Spano for most of my correction career. I met him when he was a assemblyman and a Republican. So I've watched his career, and I'm at a loss for words, because I'm kind of disappointed, to the fact that he will play on the ignorance of the voter, because number one, the congressman has nothing to do with bail reform. He has no vote in the state legislation, and for someone that's a former assemblyman for the state and someone who's a current mayor of one of the largest cities in the state. I think that he is well aware of the political process and what takes place, especially with state legislation. If he wanted to have any beef about the bail reform, he should talk to his senator, Andrea Stewart Cousins. That critique should have went to her, not Jamaal Bowman, because when the bail reform law was passed, Jamaal Bowman wasn't even a congressman. So I don't understand how he made the connection to bail reform to Congressman Bowman.
Yeah.
And to say that he should have been arrested for making a vote is ludicrous. So with all the corruption of politicians and all the lousy votes of politicians in local, state, county, he's going to say that Mr. Bowman, Congressman Bowman, should be arrested. Well, there was a lot of other politicians that he could have made that statement with too, but he didn't.
Yeah,
he made it towards a black man.
that's right.
And I'm watching the airwaves to see what black politician will will critique him. Now, we have a lot of local organizations, but not one politician, right? We have Biaggi, but where are the black politicians in critiquing him and asking him to apologize? Congressman Bowman, where are they at? I'm quietly waiting to see before I put pen to paper if they're going to say something, because then we cannot, if we're not going to correct ourselves as Democrats. I'm a registered Democrat, right? If we're not going to correct ourselves as Democrats, then you can't say nothing to the Republicans for not saying nothing to Trump. You become a hypocrite. You become a complete hypocrite. So I'm especially the black politicians, because we need y'all to start speaking up when it's time to start speaking up. We've been waiting a long time for y'all to say something about race in this county. Not that you put a couple of black faces in places that we really don't get any benefit from, as far as departmental policies or anything like that. So when this is blatant, and it's at one of our congressmen, it's bad enough. We're looking at the redistricting of these districts that they're about to try to eliminate 2 black congressmen from our district. So I think we have to start being vocal about these issues. We can't say we're the most diverse county, but then have quiet, silent, or just passive racism going on.
Damon, you're talking about like what happens after the apology, and David can speak to that, because like after the apology, you still have racism, the systems that have to be dealt with. But I had an idea about Spano and what he said. You remember the Karen? You know what a Karen is?
Yes.
I am. But
Not you, Karen. This a white lady. That's a white lady who feels that her privilege is being encroached upon by a black person, right? That like she's feeling uncomfortable. Like this black person is like overstepping their boundaries. I think Spano pulled a Karen. We have a very powerful black congressman who is speaking to half of the lived experience and understands completely what's going on in Yonkers. And he's speaking powerfully for the people. He is of the people. He's a man who's loved. He's an educator. He's a parent. He lives in Yonkers. And I think he's encroaching. And I think Spano pulled a Karen. And white people have to, I think, Damon, that white people have to do their work too. And we're here talking about that, After he apologizes, if he ever does, we still have the work of undoing racism.
That's right.
Which is all of the systems that Mr. Spano And the 79 years of Len Spano, Nicholas Spano, now we got, what's his name? Mike Spano. 79 years of political life. And what have they done for the population that Mr. Bowman is taking a stand for? Bottom stuck. And so, I just kind of feel like, that's the work that we're left with, needing to be accountable to that. And maybe just like Elliot Engel, he won because Elliot Engel was kind of stale. Man was around there for 30 years. We're talking 79 years of Spanos. It's a little stale. And in 2022, you do this dog whistle and you pull a Karen, it's stale. And it's time for us to lift the visionary leadership of Mr. Bowman and, to think about all of Yonkers, not just the Yonkers that Mr. Spano is talking about, or the Yonkers that you would think that Mr. Bowman is talking about, because Mr. Bowman really is talking about everybody. Mm-hmm. He's talking about all children. He's talking about all families.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Bob.
Well, firstly, let me extend a hearty welcome to all the guests, especially Sandy, whom I know personally, and of course, my man DK. It's a pleasure to be on with you guys to talk about today's issue, the latest firestorm of controversy that Mayor Spano ignited with his flippant comments, I think, to echo a point that everyone has made previously. I can only express my equal consternation, disappointment that Mayor Spano would show such a lack of sensitivity about the use of language to describe an elected official at a time when we have seen a concerted attack on American democracy. Yeah. I do want to note that in calling for the congressman's arrest with no real justification at all, what he has done is, in some respects, legitimated the language of extremists today who maintain that those who are fighting for working class people and advocate for policies that look to reverse the tide of stagnation in the financial well-being of working class people is unacceptable. Especially because Congress, I know I listened to the tape, when AJ alerted me after receiving your email message, Sandy, I imagined that he might have said it to be flip and to make a kind of humorous quip in his view, but it shows poor judgment and off-color humor that should not be acceptable. It should not be acceptable for anyone who strives to represent the majority of Americans who cut across racial and ethnic lines to resuscitate these old racial tropes that we know have a very, very deep history and are activated at times when right-wing forces are looking to consolidate their control over the United States as we find today. Mm-hmm. So it showed such a poor lack of judgment. And, I don't know Mayor Spano well. He's been on the show once or twice, seemed like a decent fellow. But I, like AJ, and I guess Damon, are hesitant as Black men to, label someone as racist, given, all the heightened sensitivity. But whatever we call it is simply inappropriate. That's number one. But I think Sandy has really raised the deeper point that we really need to reflect on a lot more closely. And that is the extent to which figures like Mayor Spano or the journalists on whose show he appeared. And who is that, AJ?
Phil Reisman and Reach, yeah.
Right, because what we've seen in the United States today, that is increasingly, there has an elite that's come to dominate institutional life, whether we're talking about the political sphere or the media. And in this case, it seems like we've almost had a kind of tag team match in which local media elites and political elites sort of engaged in a tag team to discredit one of the few progressive voices that have emerged in the county in recent years. Now, it took everyone by great surprise that Congressman Bowman, who I think we'd all agree is a progressive, was able to oust such a long-time incumbent. But I think our surprise would be less shocking if we were to actually look at the underlying economic conditions of the city of Yonkers and the county of Westchester over the past decade or so. And it begs the question, do individuals like Phil Rosman, like Mike Spano, truly represent the needs and interests of the residents of Yonkers or the county as a whole, when we can be certain? You know what? I'm not struggling to put my 3 kids into a private school. You want me to tell what? And I don't know if that was the right interview. It might have been an earlier interview. But you know what? I'm struggling to make ends meet to send my kid to public school, to a public college, CUNY or SUNY. That is a tremendous burden. You know, so here I'm hazarding a guess. I think all of the figures who have ignited this controversy clearly represent, we'd say, the 1% of Westchester. Incomes in the range of 100, 150,000 or better. And that is well out of the average income here in Westchester County, which is, I think, something like the median household income is like $63,000 a year. I think the average, I was just looking at the census report, the average income in the city of Yonkers may be $35,000 a year. Who is out of touch? What policies will truly advance the economic and financial interests of the city of residents of Yonkers, the people of Westchester? Is it the kind of milquetoast policies that Mayor Spano and Phil Rosman and his guests seem to prefer? Or is it the kind of social infrastructure policies that were at the heart of the struggle that Congressman Bowman and other members of the Progressive Caucus in the Democratic Party waged? And I have to say, my understanding is that's over roughly 100 people at the congressional level. We're talking about, it's got to be about half of the the Democratic Caucus now define themselves progressive. So those are my comments. I've said enough. I yield the floor.
Go ahead, Damon.
I want to, you know, I think it's really about, and maybe sooner or later we'll come to a realization that, you know, he's comfortable in making statements because, especially with Congressman Bowman, because, you know, he's number one, he slipped through the back door. Nobody thought he was going to win. And to have a dynamic speaking Black man that's uncompromising in his speech upsets the power dynamics of the politics of Westchester County. You know, and I'm saying that from experience, right? While they was worried about me, Jamaal Bowman snuck in. And I literally think that the silence of the Democratic Party around this is the fact that Jamaal puts a threat in the power dynamics. You know, now there's racism, and there's something that me and AJ talked about, and I say I call it the white code. Nobody wants to upset the white code. They don't want to make other white people mad in Westchester County.
That's right.
When it comes in dealing with Blacks in power and Blacks that represent Black people's interests and don't compromise on it. He has been the only Black politician that I've known in my 53 years to really speak openly about reparations.
Mhm.
That's scary to some Black folks to talk about reparations, especially in Westchester County. So when you start changing the power dynamics, even those Black elected officials get scared. So I think that's what it is, you know, and he's comfortable. He's comfortable with that because he knows that a lot of these Black politicians are not going to say anything.
I think it's also incumbent upon the white politicians to say something, right?
Yeah.
If
I
we
agree.
really are a different party than the opposition party, if we really are not like the Republicans, then certainly a dog whistle akin to lock her up ought to enrage all of us,
Exactly.
ought to engage white leaders as well, who have talked about the fact that they embrace multiculturalism. They are against oppression of any kind. Many of them say this. Many of them platform on this. It's time not to just, because I think a lot of times we look inward of what we need to do differently, and we're not putting the pressure that we need to put on white politicians to stand up for the Black and brown people who voted for you. Stand up for women Black women who had your back. Stand up for this Black man and say, this is wrong.
Yep.
We're not going to go down this road. We're not going to allow you to do this because we're allegedly better than, more ethical than those who would say lock her up and do all kinds of high crimes and hide their hands.
Mhm.
I just want to say, so we're not only just talking about the first African American congressman to serve that district, we're also talking about Dr. Jamaal Bowman, who founded a public school. We're
Right.
talking about a Black man whose first interaction with law enforcement was being beat up by the police at the age of 11 and has been profiled for stealing his own car by the police. You understand what I'm saying? And most importantly, even if you take away all of the titles and the elected official, you're also talking about one of Mike Spano, Mayor Mike Spano's constituents.
That's right.
And I think that's important to make that you know what I'm saying? We're not just talking about, you know, just a congressman. And I agree, they fear what they can't control. And he has proven to be outspoken in a way that scares a lot of people, Black and white. Because we've also had house Negroes that have always sold out, you know, the outspoken Black person because they fear they're making their life difficult. You know what I'm saying? So it's just Black and white. And I thought this was a very important conversation to have, a timely conversation. And I wanted to definitely involve Sandy and the rest of y'all, so it wasn't just like me, Bob, and Damon just, you know, rattling it off. And
Right.
I'm gonna have some other people come in the 7:00 hour. But I hope this is the beginning of a conversation that is necessary to have,
Right.
that we don't have in this county, where one of the wealthiest counties, that they don't believe stuff like racism and homelessness and all these things don't exist.
Right.
David and I have talked to almost every police commissioner and all these police community relations forums and stuff. And do you know, I think every police commissioner has told us, and police chief, that there's no racism in their department. I think every one of them has told us to our face. So it's something that they don't want to acknowledge. And I think it was important for Black Westchester to bring this out, especially at this time, and strike while the iron is hot and start this conversation.
Right.
Thank you so much. Just one little tiny point I want to add to that. I think it's also important as Black leaders with voices that we agitate white leaders to come out. Not just our allies, but the ones who normally would be quiet have to be pushed. So that's where the work is. It's not necessarily on, oh, why aren't the Black leaders speaking up? Certainly they should, but the agitation has to be with white leaders to speak up, because racism is not a Black problem. We suffer under the manifestations of it, but the ideas of racism and supremacy and things like that come from a white mindset.
Right.
Yes,
And
you know,
it's going to come out of them learning to correct themselves.
David.
yeah, you know, and when I listen to you, this conversation could be happening anywhere in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
anywhere. And so the learning from that as we organize locally is that we're a part of a much larger arrangement. And white silence, is deadly. It kills like COVID kills, And so those of us who are white, who would say that we're for race equity or we're for fairness, whatever language we use, then we have to find our voice. And those of us who are organizers in every setting we're in, this is one of the beautiful things about Sandy Barnebei. In every setting she's in, the subject of race and inequities will emerge and will come up. And people have a reaction to it. So we always bringing that race thing into it. We were getting along fine before you raised that issue. And yet that's a poison that infects us in the United States. And we're no different up here in the greater New York City area. It infects us. You can see it at school board meetings. You can see it, wherever you are. So, the discussion is all politics is local is what they used to say, Tip O'Neill. And the reason that all politics is local is those politics are also national in scope. So I've appreciated listening in on you.
Yeah. I want to, David, thank you. I want to zero in on what Spano said about Mr. Bowman and exactly what you're saying. He said that his thinking isn't in line with those who live here.
Mm-hmm.
And until we look at the data and say, well, what about the harm that's done? How come your graduation rates for kids of color is at this rate? What about the homelessness? What about the employment? What about the harm that's done when you say this kind of thinking doesn't represent people who live here? Doesn't everybody live here? Mr. Bowman is saying everybody's outcomes need to improve. Everybody's got to get a fair chance at a good life. And so I agree that, white silence kills.
Yeah.
And we have to say to Mr. Spano, isn't in line with those who live here? Are you talking about everybody who lives here or just some people who live here? What about the people who aren't making it here? What are we going to do about that, Mr. Spano? What about, you're under DOJ investigation twice. How come you're not getting, we have data that shows you that all your residents aren't treated the same. What are we going to do about that? So we're just talking about Mr. Spano's intent, but I want to talk about Mr. Spano's harm. And Mr. Spano just represents the man, or he just represents, like David said, it could be any mayor of any city, right? The White Plains, we got the White Plains mayor and the police. So I like that this conversation is not just about Mr. Spano, but he is like emblemic. He's like an emblem. He's like the I don't know, just the symbol of white power. And when we just allow them to say whatever they can say and not be accountable for the harm that's done, then we are complicit. Absolutely. And white people have to stand up. We are complicit.
Can I say one more thing? And that would be around the issue of incarceration. See, you're talking about a loaded word, in terms of who gets incarcerated and for what. When you talk about bail reform, you're talking about, well, who's in jail? And usually, it's disproportionately Black and it's disproportionately poor. So being able to have fair access to making bail is a big issue. It might not be for someone like myself, who has, but for many people, it's the sons and daughters that are getting arrested and are in need of fair and access to bail. So incarceration plays a big role. So if the mayor says he ought to be put in jail, that's going to, send a different message, as has been said, than he might have intended. But I don't think white folk are that innocent. I think we know when we say something that, we just don't expect to be called on it, and we don't expect it to be overheard, So, this is a very rich discussion.
So, my brother Damon, well, let me just say real quick. So, you said, where are the black elected officials? No black elected official wants to speak.
I saw Chris Johnson.
Someone heard you and they coming to speak. So let's welcome Chris Johnson to the table.
I'm see, you know, I knew when I make the call, somebody will answer.
So he had typed his comment in the comment section, and I asked him if he wanted to actually come on camera and say it himself, as opposed to me reading it. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I just and thank you for the guests. I want to point out, Sandy, I think everything that you said, all of the guests, everything that you said have been on point, especially the comments regarding who's us, who is us. And I think the reality is, someone in the comments talking about dog whistle, and can we talk about that when it's not, F this N, right? Which is a loud whistle that everyone can hear. Everyone knows what it means, and there's no question about it. A dog whistle is set for a very specific group of people to hear what was being said. And so when the mayor says he should be arrested and he's not one of us, and starts talking about bail reform that obviously disproportionately negatively affected Black and brown people, those comments, and in their totality, separately and together, were meant for specific people to hear. Oh, this man is not like us, and do not support him because he is not one of us.
That's right.
Agreed. Totally. But what's even crazier. So if Congressman Bowman, right, is not representing whatever us is. So when he vetoed the increase in affordable housing, who was he representing?
Right.
Who was he representing?
We're talking about Mike Spano, right? Talking about the mayor.
Mayor Spano, when he vetoed to increase affordable housing in Yonkers, and we know that affects, poor Black, Latino, and poor white.
That's right.
But who was the us he was representing when he vetoed that?
So he's never accountable for the harm. He's never accountable for the harm.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So he's just a hypocrite. So that's him just being hypocritical.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I was going to speak on before County Legislator Johnson joined us was, this goes into a history of white men who in power trying to criminalize and diminish and discredit the accomplishments of Black men when they start moving up in power. And even if that wasn't his intention, you have to understand that because of the history of this country and how long it has been done, it's a trigger. You understand what I'm saying? Like, there are triggers that this country has never dealt with. You know what I'm saying? And there's certain things that are triggers, and that's a trigger to the history of this country, the well-documented history of this country. And you have to understand that when you make these points, especially when you are over, after the census, Yonkers is now the third largest city. So that means when he speaks, there are other people in the state that are listening to what this man is saying. And just like Donald Trump, who made certain comments to amplify and greenlight or make it okay for other people to say what they have to say, there's a group of people that will latch on to these comments that were made. You understand what I'm saying? And that's what we're dealing with here.
I've had the pleasure and the opportunity to represent people in the city of Yonkers for 10 years. And I know that I have to choose my words wisely. And, even right now, as I speak, right, as I think about the words that I'm about to say, I have to choose them in a way that represents those people, speaks to the needs, and honestly puts me in a light that the people expect me to be in. Mike Spano's been elected for 30 years. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's saying. He knows exactly what. And if there was a mistake, if he misspoke, if he didn't mean it that way, then he should apologize. And there's been no apology. So he meant it.
But after the apology, we need some action here.
Agreed.
it's just not enough. Who cares about we care about the apology, yes, but he has to be accountable. The Spanos have to be accountable for 79 years of leadership that left behind the people that they weren't talking about, the harm that was done, and 79 years of governance, right? They have to take a look at the data. Who was left out? And we have to, and I guess white people have to stand up and say, you got to represent everybody. We want to see the data that everybody's doing well in Westchester and Yonkers.
Sandy, we are always left out. Even when we sit with the county exec and waste our damn time for 3 years, right? We get left out. That's why they're all white men as commissioners in law enforcement and not one person of color, because we get left out. Right. And nobody says anything. And I could almost guarantee you, right, there's going to be Negroes that's going to be standing with him when he runs for a state or county position, even after this. Because see, we just fall in line. And that's what we usually do, and we literally get nothing.
So I just want to say, so he hasn't apologized. And we will be reaching out to him, but in the Riverdale Press, so when they did the story, he sent them a statement that they're quoting him saying, while being interviewed by a reporter who mentioned Jamaal Bowman's recent arrest during a protest, I expressed my disappointment to his no vote on the infrastructure bill, which ultimately hurts families across the state that can't be ignored. And he was talking about it hurts working families, and working families was one of the people that were the first ones to issue a statement. The New York director was trying to be here today. She couldn't make it, but she's definitely open to coming on another time to discuss this as far as she's concerned. So, you said if he didn't mean it, he would have apologized. That was what the statement was after the statement started coming out. That was his statement.
Right. Look, my understanding is that the Progressive Caucus understood that the infrastructure bill was going to pass because there were enough votes with the Republicans, and they stood with the president's agenda because it was safe to do so. They knew that by doing that, they were not going to jeopardize that. They did it because they had to take a stand for the president's agenda. And in fact, 13 Republicans joined Democrats and passed that. And they knew that.
We have one of the other statements that came out quickly was the Westchester Black Women Political Caucus. And we have the president of the Yonkers chapter. She's been in the waiting room the whole time. So I wanted to give her a chance to speak and make a comment. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm a Yonkers resident, and I've been a Yonkers resident for over 30 years. I'm also a human being, and I'm an individual. The right to vote is the foundation of any democracy. And for the mayor of my city to make a statement stating that an elected official should be arrested because of the way he voted, that is very wrong. Mm-hmm. The infrastructure and Build Back Better bills are the full Biden agenda. Democrats, and we're all Democrats, I'm a Democrat, said that both would pass, and Bowman committed that he would vote yes if both bills were packaged together. Instead, they broke it up. And being a man of integrity, Congressman Bowman voted no because it was not a package deal as promised. We still don't have Build Back Better. As of today, I stand along with community partners asking for Mayor Mike Spano to apologize publicly to Congressman Bowman, as such utterance should never, ever, ever have been made. As a public official, just like Chris Johnson said, you have to be careful and choose your words wisely. I'm a Yonkers resident, so he represents me. I'm part of this community. Right. Now, we have to remember, this is the same Mike Spano that vetoed affordable housing, which is hurting my community. But no one ever said he would be arrested. Mm-hmm. And as we all know, Yonkers has a huge, huge housing crisis right now. So we have to correct his behavior. Just like when you're raising children, when they do something wrong, you correct their behavior. We have to tell the mayor of my city, Yonkers, that this is not acceptable. He has to be held accountable, and this action has to be corrected.
One of the things Damon and I always said since we started, when you err in public, you have to be corrected in public.
Absolutely.
So this is not a time to go behind the scenes and have a conversation. This comment was public on public radio, and then was covered by a newspaper that runs throughout the county. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I covered it from the angle of the organizations pushing back, and that's why I wanted to have this show. Again, because we need to have these conversations. Right. These conversations are not happening anywhere. Right. And we don't need to continue to have these conversations behind closed doors. We need to be calling things out as they are. You understand what I'm saying? And that's why I try to. Right. We have a few more people that's supposed to come a little later. That's why I wanted to put this panel together. Dr. Bob, you've been quiet for a while. Do you have any comments or questions for anybody on the panel?
Well, I'll offer up another comment, and that is that I think the nub of the issue here is what is legitimate political action by our foremost elected leaders in the face of intransigence on the part of the mainstream leaders of our two-party system, especially the Democratic Party, in the face of obstructionism. Is it legitimate for elected officials to go beyond conventional votes within the legislature itself? And I think that a case has to be made that it is. That one of the reasons that we're seeing this level of tumult here in the United States is precisely because the overwhelming majority of Americans have reached the conclusion that our political system is not responsive. And they are increasingly demanding that anyone who would purport to represent them with integrity make use of the full range of tools, including nonviolent political action, which is a tradition that African Americans have pioneered here in the country. And in this sense, it represents a return back to a kind of fighting spirit that my sense is that Democratic Party members sorely miss. And that we can be sure that should we continue to be, should be represented by hardcore moderates like Mayor Spano, we will continue to see a defection of members from the Democratic Party to, an independent status. Indeed, if we were to look at the county in terms of the proportion of people's party affiliations, the truth is that the Democratic Party has abdicated the mantle of leadership, and that more and more people are opting not to identify as Democrat precisely because they refuse to stand foursquare behind policies that are in the interest of the American working class as a whole. We will lose sight of if we focus solely on what we might generously call the mayor's faux pas, is unintended breach of social etiquette when using the label of criminal to describe Congressman or calling for his arrest. We really will lose sight of the underlying question. What were the policies that were at stake? What were the policies that were at stake in this most recent debate? And is the proposal to simply build out the physical infrastructure of the United States going to be enough to turn around the long-term stagnation that we've seen in our social infrastructure, and to ensure that we're not just rebuilding the physical infrastructure, but the social infrastructure that's required to make our society one that works for everybody? I've looked at the decade by decade change in the general economic situation in Yonkers, noting the change in occupations. And I'll say, one of the most significant, the single largest industry that saw growth in over the past decade was healthcare and social assistance. And let us recall that one of the refrains that has been made by Congressman Bowman and other members of the Progressive Caucus is that we need to invest in our care economy, not just the physical infrastructure, but we need to invest in the kind of social programs that are going to ensure people can take full advantages of the opening and the opportunity structure. And there's two things in the main that were called for. You know, a couple of things I can remember. Increase in national funding, national federal funding for pre-K programs, right? And if we were to, we know that women especially have been hard hit during the pandemic precisely because too many often lack the support of a partner in the household. But even if you are a single male who's heading a household, the child care supports that have been called for would do a tremendous amount to ensure that single parents of any gender have the ability to enter, you know, a fair chance to enter the workforce on a full-time basis, and to ensure that young children get adequate exposure, you know, to the kind of instruction that they need in order to ensure that they get off to a good foot. I mean, I'm sure you guys have heard this statistic cited that many kids who are growing up in households that fall in the lower socioeconomic range are experiencing essentially a conversational deficit. Their parents are not talking as much to them. They're not hearing as many words. Those are absolutely vital in the development of children, and that the expansion of pre-K seems like a plausible way to try to ensure that kids are going to get out on, you know, make up for this vital kind of informal instruction that they're missing out on. You know, the comments of Mayor Spano, Phil Reisman, or his guests leave this glaring deficiency in our public education system unaddressed. Since you guys don't think that the programs that Congressman Bowman were fighting for, why don't you tell the people of Yonkers, the residents of Westchester County, what you propose as an alternative? You know, I guess I could go on, everyone, but, you know, I think the point is well made that, and we need to do this for all of the other major programs, because essentially what Mayor Spano and Phil Reisman are counseling is a continuation of the same.
Right.
That we continue to neglect investment in the social infrastructure of this nation, and you know, essentially find a way to weather the kind of tumult and turmoil that has been unloosed on this nation, in large part, let's be clear, because white working class people are hurting desperately. That's the irony here. They have blown the dog whistle to attract everyone's attention to, you know, the transgressions of the black man who says we need to invest in social infrastructure, while it will be the significant number of working class whites who are going to continue to suffer.
Let me
got nothing at all for them.
Let me stop you real quick right there.
Them as wars of dogs of war.
Right. Let me stop you right there temporarily, Dr. Bob. I know Damon has to go to work, and before he leaves, I want to give him a chance to get any last words in.
Now, I just want to thank everybody who came on today's show. I think when we see or hear blatant racism and political games that are played against against anyone, but especially against Black people here in Westchester. I think it's refreshing to see pushback, which we must have to start pushing back, because Westchester is a microcosm of the rest of the country, but they would like to act like there's no racism and biasness in Westchester. You know, they always want to act like that we're not like everybody else, but in some cases we are worse than other places. So it's refreshing, and I want to thank everybody who came on. And I apologize that I have to leave. I do have to get myself ready for work. But
before you leave, I do want to give credit to my colleague Terry Clements, who is the head of Black Dems.
Yes,
Chester, who did put out a statement as well.
I was going to read that. I was going to read that next too. But.
Yeah. And thank you, brother Chris. You heard the call, and I'll be watching for other Black elected officials, because it has to be a united front, right? It just can't be you, Chris, right? If they got this melanin in our skin, they should be offended too. And they should not be, and because we know the injustices, right? We know the injustices. We know police departments in Westchester County have abused Black people, and for him to say that about a Black man, we all should be outraged, because at any given day, it could be us.
That's right.
Right. So if I'm looking to see who's going to say something, you know, I'm glad the Black Dems put something out, but I'm looking individually. Who's going to say something? Are you offended? You know, or are we going to start doing this behind closed door stuff? He said it in public. He has to be checked in public. You know, and if the white elected officials come on, great. But we have to have our own voices too. And that's all I'm saying. So, you know, I'm going to wait 2 weeks before I put pen to paper and see who's going to say something and who's not. And I'm going to call them all out, because then we shouldn't vote for them, because they're not representing our interests. Well, then whose interests are you representing? If one of ours who's speaking on our interests is disrespected and nobody say anything, then you need to get called out too, and maybe we shouldn't give you our vote. That's all I got to say. Y'all have a great night.
My brother. And coming on the show now, we have just trying to get him on for a minute. We have the head of the Yonkers NAACP, Reverend Frank Coleman, who was also one of the first ones to make a statement. And I just want to say, I'm not sure if Reverend McLean could be here, but New Rochelle NAACP released a statement in solidarity with the Yonkers NAACP. Welcome to the show, Reverend Coleman. You're muted. Hello.
There we go. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
Yes. So, go ahead, Bob.
Reverend Coleman will forgive me for taking the opportunity to extend to him a special welcome to the show. He is the former pastor of my family's ancestral church, Shiloh Baptist Church of Tuckahoe, and it's good to see you again.
God bless you, sir.
My brother. Absolutely.
God bless you.
So speak on. I wanted to give you a chance to speak on, your statement. What this comment meant to you. Why you came out. Why you felt the need to even make a statement.
Well, I mean, for me, you're talking about, first of all, as a Black man, historically, we have been deemed inferior. As I said in my statement, we've been deemed as chattel. Bottom line, we have been looked at as property.
Can I interrupt you real quick, Reverend Coleman?
Yes.
Yes. I don't know who has a child in the background. Can you please mute yourself? Okay. That's
Smile gave it away.
My bad. Go ahead, Reverend Coleman.
Let's talk about my baby.
So, I just have to make sure I make this very clear. You can't talk about Chris's baby. That's our baby too.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. 3J's the star of the show. We know 3J.
But in all seriousness, that is part of what hit me so hard is because I'm really very astute in our history, and when it comes down to this rhetoric that continues to come forth, I'm getting more and more tired of the dog whistle rhetoric, and then it's used as misspoken.
Mm-hmm.
When will we understand that this so-called misspoken rhetoric is actually their hearts? It's actually what they're really thinking, what their actual conclusion is when it comes down to Black and brown people.
Yes.
And so when you make the comment of arresting a congressman, a Black congressman, the first one for this, when you say that, I'm totally and completely insulted, because first of all, you don't have to agree with decisions that he may have made. You don't have to agree with the fact that, yes, maybe he voted no against the infrastructure and bill, and there are many people who disagreed. But does that mean that you make the comment of arrest? How about the fact that there was no connection to the arrest that he did have? That arrest was standing up for the voting rights bill that was voted down. And
Good
he was
point.
arrested because he stood for that.
That's right. That's good.
What if you would have made the comment? What if he would have made the comment, well, I really appreciate him standing up for that, but then I disagree with him voting against the infrastructure bill? You make that statement, none of us is going crazy.
That's right.
It's just politicians making their opinions and their views, and they agree to disagree, and you run on those things. But you have to instead use it in the manner of rhetoric that locks up a Black man for no crime. Well, we've in our history, we've dealt with that enough. And we're still continuing to deal with that. And when is this spoken rhetoric going to be seen for what it is? I mean, I'm an African American who votes. And Mitch McConnell said, yeah, African Americans vote like Americans. But that's just supposed to be misspoken rhetoric? No. They're speaking from their hearts, from their thoughts, from their own experiences, from their viewpoints. And it's time for us, especially in light of, just like Damon said, that it was called out, it was said publicly, it should be responded to publicly. And that is why we're all speaking the way in which we speak. So this is, my thing is that we've got to stop it with giving the excuses to the rhetoric that is shared and saying, oh, that's all it was misspoken. Well, when will that be? I mean, if I say something out of line, guess what? They're going to jump all over it. They're going to go crazy and say, absolutely, that's how he feels. But if they're not white, then, well, there's just misspoken. It's come on. I'm really trying my best to be as calm as I can about this, because I have too many of my classmates who I grew up with, who have dealt with this racism. I've also understand, because I was the president of the NAACP in South Boston, Halifax County, Virginia, where the Ku Klux Klan threw a message in my yard to let me know they knew where I lived and all of the subtleties that come with it. And they always continue to use dog whistle language. Guess what? I've been in this long enough. I know dog whistle language.
Let me ask a question to Reverend Coleman, Sabomi, and Christopher Johnson. So, in the mayor's comments, he said Congressman Jamaal Bowman's political philosophy is not in line with the people who live here. You are three of the people who live here, so I would like you to speak to that.
So let me answer that question. I've lived in Yonkers for 30 years, so I've seen the change for the African American community in Yonkers. So I'm a person that lives here. I'm so happy that Congressman Bowman got elected because, unlike most people, he hasn't drank the Kool-Aid. He speaks about what our problems are. 30 years ago, Yonkers has had a program, and there's a high school called Saunders High School, Saunders Strait High School. If you wanted to become a Black millionaire up until 1990, you could go to Saunders, you could become a carpenter, you could become a mason, have your own business, and your money supply is unlimited. That program does not exist for us anymore. Now they package it as apprenticeships. You understand what I'm saying? So that has gone. And I've seen that in the 30 plus years I've lived here. So Mayor Mike Spano is not talking about me. He's not talking about my community. He doesn't understand the needs that affect my community. I'm also a licensed realtor. A one-bedroom apartment in Yonkers today is over $2,000. Let's be real. How can someone who's making $35,000 afford $2,000? And the fact that he vetoed the Affordable Housing Act, that's just, it's insane that we're allowing this to continue. So you have to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. My grandmother always said that. So we have to come together and have him apologize publicly and then put a process into place where he understands clearly that this kind of language will not be tolerated by Black and brown people who are the residents of the city of Yonkers.
Chris Johnson, I don't know if you heard the question. Mike Spano was quoted saying that Congressman Jamaal Bowman's political philosophy is not in line with the people who live here. You live here, so would you like to speak?
I do, and I would say, I have disagreed with, and as I say in my comment, I've disagreed with the mayor several times over, and have never done what he did and called for his arrest. But in addition to that, I would point out that he struggles in some cases to know what people that live here want because he doesn't have them around him. I mean, I have pressed the mayor time after time on how many individuals he has hired that look like me and Congressman Bowman. The reality is that there are at least 14 departments in the city of Yonkers. And if you count the department heads and their deputies, I believe he currently has 2 people out of 14 who are Black or brown. And he hired 3 in his first term and fired them in his first term. So he has a history of not having a diverse team around him. And when you don't have people with different thoughts around you, you become part of a bubble. And then, it's like you're talking to yourself. And so I would push back on that statement, obviously, and say that the mayor, while he has his finger on the pulse of many Yonkers residents, and that's why he's the mayor, he does not understand the thoughts and the needs of the diverse community that stands around him.
Reverend Coleman, same question.
Yes. Well, the thing that we need to be mindful of is when he shared the answer that he's not for the people of Yonkers and what they're supporting. He might be speaking right depending on who he's speaking about. So we need to be mindful of that. It depends on who he's speaking about. He can't be speaking about the people who are struggling with low income housing. He can't be speaking about the people who need affordable housing. He can't be speaking about those persons, because I speak to them on a regular basis, and these are the things that they need, and they are fighting, just wanting somebody to fight for them in these areas. So the reality is, it depends on who he's talking about. Again, the rhetoric we have to pay attention to when individuals say what they say, because yes, he may very well be talking about the people who he supports and who support him in his perspective. But I can say that's not who I've been speaking to. That's not what they say when it comes down to these things that are needed. And then when you're talking about him right now, I'll just give you a heads up right now. We're looking at the deseg information. There's a lot that I've been seeing that I'm very disappointed with, because though it's there, it hasn't been brought forward. It hasn't come to fruition. So we still have much that has to be worked out when it comes down to those things. I have a lot of people who are in the opposite direction of what the mayor is saying.
You know, Sandy has correctly been pointing out in this conversation that the policies are important, right? And so let's look at the infrastructure bill and what the mayor's responsibility is with regard to infrastructure locally, right? We see what happened in the Bronx with the fire, and those individuals not having heat in their homes and having to rely on the purchased space heater, and that, you know, going awry and being a tragedy. Well, the city of Yonkers building department, if I said it leaves a lot to be desired, that would be an understatement. And so that is a policy point that is completely left, ignored. And so when we talk about the infrastructure of the city of Yonkers, we don't have to look at an infrastructure bill nationally. We can look here to the policies in this city and say, well, you don't have a buildings department that does the inspections that's necessary to make sure that the people who do have housing are living in decent conditions. Let's not even talk about the people who are struggling to find housing, to find affordable housing, but the people that do have housing in this city are living in substandard situations, because we have a buildings department that the mayor is in charge of, that he oversees, that doesn't do its job. Right. But he's worried about the congressman and the infrastructure bill.
Christopher, may I say something to Christopher?
Absolutely.
Okay. When you said that you looked at the mayor's cabinet and you said that there were only two men of color at the head. But when we met with the county executive, there were none. And when David Billings was with us a bit ago, he says, this conversation would happen anywhere in the United States, and it's the same thing, because structural racism acts the same way in every situation. And so even though we're fighting this in Yonkers, make no mistake, the law, the civil service exam is there to make sure that white power is maintained, right? And we have to look at the laws, the policies, and the culture that keep white supremacy together. And we have to begin to dismantle that. I don't know what the procedure is, but we hear civil service exam requires that we pick the first 3 top scores, and they're always white people, right? So you just keep doing the same thing over and over again until we change the civil service exam. So what are the policies and laws and culture that's holding this framework in place that we have to say, no, we have to change that damn law? Like the kids that are I don't know. We make it illegal to go to have public transport. The kids don't have money for public transportation, so they're jumping turnstiles. Well, then change the damn laws. Why do kids not have to jump a turnstile? They don't have a buck to get on the subway. You know what I'm saying? We have to change the laws that keep white supremacy in place.
I know Brother Christopher has to go. But my next question, I want to start with you first. Is asked. One of the comments was asked. The interview was Thursday. Today's Sunday, and he hasn't apologized, and possibly will not. Where do we go from here? My question is, what is the next? What is the next call to action? What do we do now? An apology would be great, but that is not just the end all to be all. You know what I'm saying? That doesn't solve the problem, as Sandy said. So what's the outcome you would like to see come from this?
Well, look, I think there needs to be, I think one, this was clearly wrapped around politics, right? And the mayor's desire to break down the congressman so that he could seek an opportunity to run against him. And so I think it needs to be clearly made, the message needs to be clearly sent to the mayor that that the desire is not for him to be my congressional representative or the congressional representative of anyone on this call. And everyone needs to make that clear to him. I think from there, there needs to be a continual push. You know, Susan mentioned the civil service exams, but sometimes there is absolute discretion given. And, you know, we have a case and the councilwoman here in the 1st District who he appointed when I vacated the seat, you know, called him out on the promotion of a firefighter who called Black people apes on his social media. And so they still did that. He still went forward with that. And so this is not an outlier, this situation.
And then he ran somebody against her in the next election too.
Well, I did that. But but notwithstanding, you know, making sure that, you know, he understands that we will continue to push. We will not remain silent, that we're paying attention, and that when he wants to seek higher office or another office, that those opportunities will not be made available unless and until he understands the realities that he's caused, right? The realities that his policies have to people of color, to people of lower economic standing, and that they have clearly negatively impacted us. And so he's got a lot of work to do to make sure that he puts himself in a better light as we move forward. And, you know, Susan, Sandy, I completely agree with you that we've got a lot of work to do on the county level. There are some stark differences, and I'll just lay this one out. When I asked for the racial breakdown of employment when I was a city council member, my email went ignored to the point where they told me, we're not going to give you that information. When we asked for that information during the budget process at the county level, it was given up within 2 days. So there that does exist. There is a desire, however minimal it might be, but we will continue to work, and I'll continue to push our county exec who wants to do the right thing. And we continue to have work to do, as you know, and we all know.
Thank you very much for your time, my brother. As always, you know, when we call, you come and you get on the camera and not afraid to say it. So we appreciate you, and hopefully that will wear off on some of your co-workers, some other Black elected officials.
Thank you very much, AJ, for having this conversation.
No doubt. Before Reverend Coleman and Sabomi, I just wanted to say something that Sandy said earlier. We were talking about leadership. And the fight on the county level for leadership. You know, when the George Floyd incident happened, and people, and I've covered protests throughout the country and throughout the state way before George Floyd, the one thing that everybody is calling for was more persons of color in leadership positions. Westchester County, out of the 43 municipalities and the county, has only one Black police commissioner in the county, and that is Mount Vernon. There are several number twos. You know, Louis Molina was put number 2 in corrections. Former police commissioner, who was the police commissioner of Mount Vernon, is put number 2 in the county. You know, like there are several number 2s, but we're never given, as far as positions of leadership, persons of color. We're never given that. So I just wanted to bring that out. Back commenting to what Sandy said, but I'm giving you a chance to answer the same question. The question was, the interview was Thursday, today is Sunday. He did not apologize and possibly will not. Where do we go from here? What's the course of action we would like to take place?
Well, one thing I will say very quickly, and that is, first of all, I would invite everyone who is the leadership of their different organizations to join us, and we demand a meeting of some sort with the mayor confronting this, because since you haven't spoken as of yet, and you see and you hear the outrage that has come forth publicly in light of your statement, and you haven't said anything, we need to come together and join forces and stand together to let the mayor know how we feel and demand a meeting, and let's share it in that manner. And if you're so willing, I will lead in doing so.
So Bowman.
Absolutely. I totally agree with him. We have to build this coalition of community leaders and call the mayor to answer for his statement. He's an elected official. He's the mayor of the third largest city in New York State. We have to amplify this until we get an answer, and we have to do it now, not tomorrow, now. We have to say, Mayor Mike Spano, with all due respect, those utterances, those statements you made against an elected official were very inappropriate, and you must be corrected on this action. And this is where I really elaborate on diversity and inclusion in the city of Yonkers.
Okay.
We had the first Black human rights commissioner. She was let go. We had the first Black Parks and Recreation commissioner. She was let go. So he has a record of not putting us in positions of leadership. And we have to say, we are part of this community. We are a big part of this community. We have to be included in all the decision-making processes in this community. So we have to hold him to action.
And could I say one quick thing right here at that moment, as to your point? One of the things that I think that we need to make sure, and this is the reason why we do need to always come together, is that many times we hear people say, and it's not true, but we hear people always saying, well, the Black community is not speaking up. Let me tell you something. The Black community has always been speaking up. It's just that nobody listens. And but what happens is that we speak up in different organizations and areas, and we're separated, and so it looks like we haven't said a word. But we do speak up, and we do stand, and we do complain about the things that and the difficulties that we're going through, and yet no one wants to listen. And they use those excuses of hearing it in separate entities or separate times and motifs that they think that no, they're not saying anything. But so what I'm saying is that, again, we need to come together once and for all and stand firm together and have that one voice. Because the reality is we have all of us, we're all saying the same thing. We just say it in different areas and different places, but we need to bring it together. And that's why I think that would be most effective.
I totally agree with you.
That was one of the moving points to doing this show tonight. I wanted to get, there was other people I wanted to get. I took it yesterday off, my birthday. I took the whole day off. So, but I put this together.
Happy birthday, man.
Thank you. I put this together very quickly. After releasing the article that showed all of the comments made by the several organizations, I felt like it was our job to spotlight all of this, to highlight, to show there are people that are speaking, and who are those speaking, so that you can join with them, so you don't feel like you're out there by yourselves. Sandy and then Karen, I want to give you the same question that the other two panelists have answered. What the question exactly was the interview was Thursday, today is Sunday. He hasn't apologized and possibly will not. Where do we go from here? And I add to that, what do we see as an outcome we'd like to come from this?
So I agree with the panelists who've already talked about us coming together, but I also think we apply pressure on other leaders, other political leaders. We shame them for not saying anything. Why are you silent in this moment? But I don't think we just shame the Black leaders. We shame the white leaders too, because we too sing America. We are here. We are your constituents. We vote for you and we will vote against you. And I think we need to make sure that we're putting that kind of pressure on them. Are you going to denounce this racist statement? Are you going to adhere to this dog whistle, this lock him up statement? Where do you stand with it? And it should be on everyone's agenda at all times. Anytime there's a conversation, anytime there's any kind of press conference that talks about something else, this has to be brought up. I think you keep putting it in people's face until you force them to help deal with the situation. So the collective we has to also become how we galvanize these political leaders to also open up their mouths, Black and white and Latino, to say, we don't think that this is right. Asian, whatever, we don't think it's right. So we put the pressure on them too. You agree with this? Because if you don't, you're awfully quiet.
Sandy?
Yeah, I want to say that I'm all for everything that everybody said, but, and, you know, catch the racist. Okay, you catch the racist, but we're not talking about a few bad apples here. We're talking about rotten from the root. And so in addition to catch the racist, make him apologize, okay, fine. Whether he does or he doesn't, you still got a lot of work to do, because Bowman needs to be reelected. And we need to make sure that civil service exams are changed so that more people can get into those high places. And what Damon always says is, we don't want to change faces and places. We want people in places that have an analysis, who understand structural racism. We don't want somebody in there that looks a particular way but is an enabler. And so I think that the work is like really about undoing racism in Yonkers. And so please, yes, of course, join the NAACP. They should be leading this charge. They want you to join them. They want to lead the charge. It sounds right and just. Mobilize. But don't be satisfied with catch the racist, because it's just like whack-a-mole. Whack-a-mole, you know, and we have to have a greater strategy. How do we undo racism in these structures? And that's how I want to end my...
Let me just say this. I think that's absolutely fantastic. And that's actually, you know, just to help articulate what I was, where I'm coming from. And that is, yes, right. We want to catch the racists, but our coming together is in the long run, in the long term, is to deal with and to be able to come together and fight all of these things that are before us that continues to marginalize our people. And see, when I was in Virginia in stand up for the NAACP there, the one thing that I did really was extremely happy about is the people coming together to fight against injustice, whatever the injustices were. So yes, it just so happens that we're talking about what we're talking about right now, but it's about any injustice that we need to be standing together, whether it's black, white, red, yellow, it doesn't matter. When we have, I have, my neighbors are a Muslim family, right? I will hurt somebody messing with my neighbor, with the racism and with the misogynistic foolishness that goes on, and speaking about the way they dress and all of that kind of, and pointing them out and all. No, it doesn't matter. I'm standing for them as well, because injustice is injustice. Racism is racism. Discrimination, bigotry, all of it. It is something we need to be standing against, and we need to get it out of our structure of politics, services, all of that. It needs to happen. So just know that I got we have our contact information in the chat. Please jot it down so we can get
absolutely
together.
Well said, Frank. Well said.
I want to say on top of that, you know, this is bigger. I don't want this to just be written off on this is just a black issue. I don't want this to be written like other people to be like, oh, that doesn't concern me. We do that not even on racial lines. We do that on city lines. Like, oh, that's just Yonkers. That don't affect me. Oh, that's Greenberg. That don't affect me. That's
Right.
But Martin Luther King, since we want to celebrate Black History Month, and his birthday just passed, and we want to quote everything he said. Let's live in the words he said: "Injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere." And I want to bring about another quote. I don't know who started this quote, but it's been often quoted. First, they came for the socialists. I did not speak because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists. I didn't speak because I'm not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews. I did not speak because I'm not Jewish. But then when they came for me, there was nobody left to have my back, kind of, sort of, because they didn't took everybody else out. So I say that to say, like, all of this and this issue is even bigger than Mike Spano. This is the latest issue, the latest dog whistle, the latest trigger. This is an ongoing problem. Tasha Young and I are asked to moderate a panel in Greenberg on racism the end of the month, where they had the boldest sign put up in the county: "All lives can't matter until Black lives matter," and they put it up on a Thursday, and Friday morning before dawn, the whole sign was ripped out of the ground, and for over 100 and almost 200 days, they left the poles still sticking up as the scene of the crime to remind you of the racism and that your life really doesn't matter. And going on almost 2 years, they still not have. I've seen the signs in the town hall meetings. The signs has never gone back up yet. So, like, I just want to say, this is not just a Yonkers thing. This is not just a Black thing. You know what I'm saying? We have to, injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. And we all need to get behind this. And we need to put pressure on our Black elected officials first and foremost. We need to put pressure on all our elected officials. Like, what are you doing about this? If you're not, that's what other groups of people do. If you're not going to speak on this, then we're not going to vote for you. You understand what I'm saying? We voted you in, we'll vote you back out. Like my mom said, I brought you in this world, I'll take you out. We vote you right back out. And we need to get in that mind state, because no one has ever given us anything that we wanted because it was the right thing to do. We celebrate now. We're celebrating Black History Month. We're celebrating the achievements of the Civil Rights era. It's time to stop just celebrating and sitting on our laurels and continue the fight. Those people in the Civil Rights era, they fought for their children and their grandchildren. Right now, we need to be fighting for our children and our grandchildren. You understand what I'm saying? It's bigger than just us right now. Like I said, I'm 56. I've always had the right to vote, but my ancestors didn't, because they fought for that, and now we're fighting again that may be taken away. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. And if we don't continue that fight, our children and grandchildren may not have that right. You know what I'm saying? And even if they have the right to vote, they won't have the right for their vote to count. You know what I'm saying? So this is just bigger. I wanted to put this in perspective. It's a lot bigger than just this one issue, but this was the latest issue. And I wanted to highlight those who did speak up, and I wanted to use this to encourage everybody else who has not spoke, who doesn't want to be out there on the ledge by themselves. Because I understand when you go to fight for somebody, and then when the rocks come and you turn around, you're the only one getting hit, and the people that you were standing there with, they where they at? That's us all the time. But I wanted to show you that there were various people that are stepping up and are speaking up, and we can collaborate with them. We can join with them. We can join forces. We can, even if we just have conversation and we start attacking this from different angles. We all have different ways of fighting this. I mean, there's no one way to do this. While people are marching and rioting and looting in the streets, Martin Luther King was meeting with the president, talking about, you understand what I'm saying? About changing legislation. We have to stop just thinking it's all one way, your way or just my way. There is no one way. We have to collectively hit these problems. And personally, I know Mike Spano from the show. Lorraine Lopez, shout out to Lorraine Lopez. She's not here today. She has brought him on a lot when he wouldn't come in the beginning. And, he's been forthcoming and he's answered our questions and everything. And I give him credit for that. But I believe you misspoke. Whether you misspoke, whether it was a joke, you don't understand the harm that was created triggered. And that's the word, triggered, from the history that the African Americans in America have faced for over 400 years. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I said before, it's like that paper cut that's on your finger that never heals, and then the next incident the cut opens back up, and the next incident the cut opens back up, and the next incident the cut opens back up, until now it's a big gash, and you need stitches to close it now. You don't, that's basically this situation is turned into a big gash. That paper cut into a big gash, and now just a simple apology won't do. What are you going to do from this? I don't know if you need sensitivity training. I don't know if you need to go see Sandy for some anti-racism training.
There you go. I'm doing racism.
I don't know, but something needs to be done. Dr. Bob, you've been quiet. I want to give you chances to speak on that. What are we going to do now? What can we do? Where do we go from here? And whatever thoughts you have.
I mean, I think the call to mobilize to bring to the attention of the mayor just how unacceptable his comment is an important one. But let's remember, everyone, all of this was done in the context of jockeying for the upcoming primary election. And I was reminded as we were sitting here that, in fact, the primary election is getting ready to kick off within a matter of mere weeks, if I'm not mistaken. I'm looking at the calendar. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm seeing the kickoff for the primary season is March 1st of this year. So what that means, and this is important because all of us have been involved in one capacity or the other in the electoral contests that have really heated up over recent years. And AJ, I'll just draw on our experiences. I know me and you have kind of worked side by side, in supporting some candidates at least. We've often felt that there has been insufficient support on the part of the masses of American citizens who have a direct stake in the outcome of these elections to actually get involved. One of the reasons why big dollars and indifferent voices continue to dominate American politics is because so many of the American people have decided to abandon the playing field. We need to be out there fighting, petitioning, calling, to express our opposition. You want me to tell it, as far as I'm concerned, Mayor Spano might be a decent fellow. I'll give him that. He could be decent. Decent people make mistakes. But Mayor Spano, you have disqualified yourself, in my view, to receive the nomination of any Black person that I know. Every Black person I know is having the same conversation right now. And our supporters, like, why in the world would you be calling for the incarceration of an elected congressman? So you've disqualified yourself, and I think it's incumbent upon those of us who understand the importance of creating a multiracial democracy to not only defeat, turn back Mayor Spano's attempt, but I would even say Commissioner Tommy Meyer. I think that the spillover for this is going to leave no one untouched. And I think we should all redouble our effort. I will say, since you brought up the comment, AJ, about the socialists, what is really going on here? Essentially, Congressman Bowman represents a progressive tradition that has often been a fellow traveler to a kind of socialist economics that calls for the use of democratic policies in order to make a more equitable economy. And that is the main threat here. In calling for and trying to criminalize the congressman, what Mayor Spano and others who share his view are essentially doing is trying to criminalize efforts to make ours a fairer, more just economy at a time when the nation finds itself embroiled in crisis. I will, there's an old saying from the history books, and y'all feel me and understand the spirit. The same person who calls me a socialist one day calls me a nigger the next. And I speak in unvarnished terms because we must see the connection between kind of anti-socialism, anti-communism, anti-progressivism for our economics, and the tradition of white supremacy that the mayor has perhaps unwittingly reinforced. And so, those are my thoughts.
I want to thank all our guests as we come to the end of the show. I mean, of course, this is a conversation that should not end here. This should be the beginning of a conversation, not just on Mayor Spano's comments, but on racism. Like I said, I was asked to moderate a panel in Greenberg. We need to be having this in every municipality. We need to be having this in all of our communities. And then we need to be coming together as a people across different communities. A couple of people said I was too light and not hard enough on Mayor Spano. I am going to bring him on. I'm going to invite him. I don't know if he'll come to appear on the show. And we're going to give him the tough questions and see if he appears. I wanted to be clear on a lot of things. He doesn't get a pass. I don't know if anybody gets that. I'm not giving this man a pass. There needs to be an apology, and there needs to be some other actions to make up for this comment. Yes, we the people. Yes, we the people. All people need to be more involved in the elections, to go out and vote. United, black, brown, white, yellow. We are in this together. Thank you, Maeve. And last words of my panel, I want to thank everybody. More people were invited. Like I said, I put this together in hours, like literally hours. Y'all have answered the call. Thanks for those that came in a little early, those who couldn't stay. We're going to continue this conversation on our show on the Black Westchester Power Hour tomorrow on WVOX, 11 a.m. to 12 noon. We will be having part 2, which is a little different because it's like 39 minutes. You get at the hour with the commercials, but you know what I'm saying? We will take it onto their airwaves too, because we'll be reaching different people. And we're going to check the website, blackwestchester.com. We will continue to cover this. We will continue to stay on top of this. And we have to hold Mayor Spano accountable, but I agree, we need to hold. We just passed, and a lot of them are my friends, so please, and I know them well. But we just got, for the first time in a long time, a minority council in Yonkers, all four women, 3 African American and 1 Latina, and no disrespect to any of them. And I've sent the article that I wrote this morning, last night, to all of them. That we need to be hearing from them greatly. We need to be hearing from. I'm glad our county legislator came on. We need to hear from our deputy county executive, who's also a Yonkers resident. We need to be hearing from Andrew Stewart Cousins and those in the state level that represent Yonkers. And we need to be hearing from others, not even that don't even just represent Yonkers, but the surrounding areas, because again, we got to stop looking at this, oh, that's just Yonkers, oh, that's just Mount Vernon, oh, that's just New Rochelle. As we see, these things affect all of us. I hope, like I said, this is the beginning of a conversation. I hope this is the beginning of some much needed work that needs to take place. As always, Black Westchester. Oh, yes, and he needs to hear from his fellow mayors as well.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say. Right. I was waiting for you to finish.
That is very important. He needs to hear from his fellow mayors across, because, yes, this is a Yonkers thing, but if your mayor is not calling this out, then you need to question your mayor.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you think his comments was appropriate? Do you need
Brother Woodson? You're right.
You need to be questioning your mayor, and mostly the mayors are coming up for election in the next year or two. So you need to be questioning your mayor. So, it's just like I said, it's hard to cover everything in one 2-hour period, but. Hopefully we've started the conversation, and we've invoked some stuff, and people are going to go on. This will be archived on blackwestchester.com when it is. Please share it with those you think that need to see it. And this is what we do.
Thank you, AJ.
I wanted to say that too, is brother Woodson. Thank you so much for having us, and I'm really grateful to be able to be a part of this discussion. and to meet some folk I didn't know. And that's what I'm saying. It helps us to come together. I mean, we're fighting this fight, and we're all sometimes feeling like we're alone. And because of you, I'm happy to feel that I'm not alone, and that I have some people that I can reach out to, and we can stand together on this. This is absolutely great. So thank you again, sir.
There was a scene in one of the Terminator movies, and young John Connor gets on the little walkie-talkie thing, and he was like, if you can hear my voice, you too are part of the resistance. There are pockets of us everywhere. And now is the time for us to collectively get together and fight right now. That is basically my call to action to everybody who hears my voice right now, who will hear it later. And for those who are hearing it, to share this with other people. There are pockets of us everywhere. It is time for us to unite. If you can hear my voice, you too are part of the resistance, and it's time to stand up. With that, I think I'm going to close. Bob, any last words? Anything after that? Well,
it was a pleasure having this discussion with everyone, and I look forward to seeing you all out on the field of battle.
Don't forget to check us out tomorrow on WVOX 1460 AM for the Black Westchester Power Hour, 11 a.m. to 12 noon. If you can't get on the radio, you can always get it on WVOX.com and on multiple apps like Tuned In and multiple apps. WVOX is on there. With that being said, you could have been doing anything, but you decided to ride with us, and we greatly appreciate it. This is and has been Black Westchester Presents, the People Before Politics radio show. We are on every Sunday, 6 to 8, streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Until next week, peace.
22 million black victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. Any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. Either way you go, that's who gets it. You're in a position to determine who go to the White House and who stay in the doghouse. You're the one who has that power. You and I have never seen democracy. All we've seen is hypocrisy. When we open our eyes today and look around America, we see America not through the eyes of someone who has enjoyed the fruits of Americanism. We see America through the eyes of someone who has been the victim of Americanism. We don't see any American dream. We've experienced only the American nightmare. We haven't benefited from America's democracy. We've only suffered from America's hypocrisy. And the generation that's coming up now can see it and are not afraid to say it. 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 And are not afraid to say it.